We're into the next session about drivers of digital subscription, and it's a real pleasure to welcome Ben Cotton, who is the Vice President of Product at the New York Times. Ben has worked in this role since August last year, and he's responsible for building new product features to increase reader engagement. He's been at the Times since 2014, leading teams in charge of retention and customer experience and product marketing after starting as a member of the corporate strategy group. Before he joined the Times, he was a consultant with McKinsey, and he graduated from Columbia and serves on the board of trustees of the Columbia Spectator. Welcome, Ben.
Great, thanks very much. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and then make sure somebody confirms that that's actually working. Okay, everyone can see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I thought as Sherlyn said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the drivers of digital subscription at the New York Times. I'll talk a little bit about sort of how we got to where we are, and I'll talk about sort of what we're doing, what we've done in particular over the last year or two to keep making our growth go faster. And I'll talk about some of the things that we're doing right now to sort of sustain the readership we're seeing from the coronavirus period, as I heard that would be of potential interest. And then I'll save a fair amount of time at the end for questions, as I'm sure folks have them. So I think a lot of people have probably seen this because we've said it quite publicly.
Sorry, just to interrupt before you go on, yes. Maybe you could do a full view of your presentation.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
How's that?
Better, yeah, thank you.
A lot of you have probably seen this before, that a major goal of ours that we set last year was to achieve 10 million subscribers by 2025. And now for quite a long time in our history, this seemed like a goal that it really would have been only a pipe dream. In fact, if you extend this chart all the way back to when our digital paywall launched in 2011, you know, we had initial goals around reaching 1 million digital subscribers, 2 million digital subscribers. When we, you know, in 2015, we set a goal of doubling what was then $400 million of digital revenue to $800 million by 2020, using a combination of digital subscription revenue and digital advertising revenue. And that would have required us, you know, getting somewhere on the order of 3 or 4 million digital subscribers. But as you know, I'm sure many of you know, we started to see subscription growth really accelerate in 2016 and 2017 after Donald Trump got sort of in the aftermath of Donald Trump getting elected president in the US. And we have managed to continue to sort of steadily increase our digital subscription growth since then, such that in 2019, we had moved into the range of 3 or 4 million subscribers and $700 or $800 million of digital revenue. And our then CEO, who's now just retired, Mark Thompson, stated that we should set a new goal of 10 million digital subscribers by 2025. And as you can sort of see in this chart, last year we got up to a good start. And actually, you know, if you were to extend this chart over into the beginning of this year, you would see that we're gaining quickly. We've captured more than 1 million new subscribers so far this year. The first 2 quarters of this year have been among our strongest ever. And you know, some of that is tied to the giant increased readership that we've seen given the news cycle, and some of it I think is down to the levers that we've introduced to be able to make the most out of a news moment like that when it hits us. And so I'll talk a little bit more about how all that happened. Sorry, is there a question or you're? Oh, that's background noise. So I mentioned Mark, who is our CEO, who just retired after 7 or 8 years. The major thing that I think has happened over the last few years that has allowed us to accelerate our digital subscription growth so substantially is to really change the way that we are doing are running digital operations. Where before we had teams that were running, we had product teams and marketing teams and engineering teams and whatnot that were running sort of in independent silos. We are now running with significant cross-disciplinary teams that have sort of all of the support they need from different functions, and they're working together and able to sort of make their own decisions and move more quickly than ever before to make decisions, launch new work, and show impact on our subscription business. We created, this was about a year and a half ago now, we created what we call these cross-functional missions to unlock future growth. And so they were tied to 5 areas. One, our core subscription growth, so really working on the very direct levers to accelerate our the subscription business. Engagement, to get many more people to engage daily with our journalism, and so getting people to sort of move towards the moments of friction where we could convert them in the subscription growth work. Those 2 are the 2 areas where I'm going to focus mostly today. That's sort of our core subscription growth, but I'll touch briefly on the new products and ventures, the new products that we're developing outside of the core New York Times experience, and brand, how we're sort of marketing what we're doing, and why it's different from others and worth paying for. The 5th is digital advertising. I'm focused on digital subscriptions today, so I'm not going to focus a ton on that. Our clearest opportunity for growth is getting the product experience itself to get millions more people to engage and subscribe. This may seem simple, but it was a meaningful change for us over the last couple of years, where before, like I said, we had sort of folks working on the product in one corner, and we had folks working on bringing users in through marketing in another corner, and the newsroom and editorial operation, of course, working in their area. We've now, over the last couple of years, brought those groups together in a much firmer way and thought about how, when users are engaging with our product itself, how is everything they're experiencing there, the product, the marketing that's there, the journalism that's there, working together to bring people towards being subscribers and then staying subscribers. The big specific bet that we made was designing a deliberate user journey that creates deeper and more engaging relationships with users and can propel our subscription growth. So I'll talk for a minute about what that means, and then I've put up some mock-ups here that help to, some screenshots here that help to show it. For the whole history of our pay models, so going back, from 8 years, from 2011 through to the middle of last year, in 2019, what we focused on was what we called anonymous users. So those are users who they come in to our site for the first time from Google or Facebook or just directly, and we don't know who they are. They're not logged in. They don't have an account with us. So for all intents and purposes, they're anonymous. And we are marketing to them very heavily, trying to get them to subscribe. But if they leave and then come back, we have really limited continuity with them, and we're kind of just hitting them with the same marketing and the same product experience over and over. And we had continued to capture subscription growth by just sort of lowering what the meter was on these users. From originally it was 20 articles allowed per month to 10 articles and then to 5 articles. So what we thought was that we might have more success longer term if we created a new model where we required registration earlier on in the process, and then we're able to develop relationships with users over a longer period of time, rather than just sort of hitting them to subscribe right away. So what you're seeing here is a version of the experience that we have on our site now, where users, if you look at the second screen, if after they've read one article, they go to their second article, we require them to register or log in with a free account. So they just have to give us an email address, no credit card, no payment of any kind. And then we move them into an experience where we try to engage them. So we get them to sign up for newsletters, as you can see here on the left. We encourage them to download our app, as you see here on the right. We have a lighter moment of friction early in our experience that allows us to begin to engage users a little bit more deeply before we start asking them sort of repeatedly to subscribe. We see users who get these newsletters, we see users who use the app be much more likely to convert. And so we've seen these as sort of virtuous behaviors we can get users to take. early in their relationship with us. And we found that that all makes it a lot easier actually for us to get users to convert. When we know who they are, we're able to communicate in a more personalized way, in a more targeted way, with different kinds of subscription messaging. We've been able to run a lot of really smart testing about what gets these registered users to convert. We've gotten to a much simpler landing page experience, you can see here on the left, than we used to have. We used to offer a number of different bundles and price points, and we still do, but we are much more focused now in what the experience is that a user gets when they hit the paywall or come to our subscription landing page, and we're able to convert a much larger percentage of them as a result. We've been able to experiment with new payment options, be that Apple Pay or PayPal or some other things, and having being able to test that on a pool of people that they're registered and we know who they are, and we can look at the impact of changes to the conversion experience to them over a period of time, because we're able to follow them across different devices and sessions, has made all of that testing and conversion work much more effective. One of the biggest benefits of this new journey, as we call it, is that we're able to constantly test in a lot more places. So where before we just had this sort of generic pool of anonymous users and we could only really hit them at the paywall, now that we have more moments along the path to subscription, that means many more things that we can test and optimize to try to make that journey better. So every part of what I just showed is undergoing constant testing to try to improve. And there's other things happening in the background. We're experimenting with what the right meter count should be for the registered users who are logged in, the user experience and the offers, the pricing and the language on that registration moment. I showed you the registration flow and getting people to log in. Every part of that is subject to really regular testing, and that's been a huge part of the benefit of this work. So the next area that I'm going to talk about is, now that we've set up this new journey, we're able to take engagement, the second pillar that I talked about, sort of the cross-functional focus areas that we laid out about 1.5 years ago, and we're able to have that do a lot more work for us. Now that we know that we're really good at getting users to register and create a relationship with us after reading one article, we can much more reliably try to bring as many users in to just see that first article, so that registration lever can go to work on them. Now that we know, we've gotten better at sort of converting those registered users, we can much more reliably bring users back, those registered users back through different levers, and move them towards the paywall, because we know that we'll be able to convert them when we get there. So engagement levers that are focused on growing our audience and bringing readers back more often, work together with those growth levers that I was just mentioning to drive up the subscription business. And the lens that I'll take on this is sort of, in particular, what we've been doing on that front this year during the coronavirus period, when I think we've been able to see sort of the benefit of work that we have been doing over the last couple of years. We've really been able to take full advantage of it during a period where we've had such a huge influx of audience. Oops, sorry about that. There we go. So the first thing I want to talk about is live and breaking news. Traditionally the Times, it was a print newspaper, and so we're publishing stories that are 500 or 800 or 1,000 words, and they are focused on being published in print, and even well into the digital era. Oftentimes our stories are very much focused on being published sort of one 800-word story at a time, similar to the way they might have looked when they were running in print. And what we've started to realize is that, I mean, we obviously know this, but we've started to lean more into places where there's real opportunity, tied specifically to the way news is evolving and unfolding online. And so one of these is the way that news unfolds in real time. And coronavirus, I think, was a great example of this, particularly in the spring, where there was so much news happening all the time. We didn't want to wait to publish individual stories. We wanted to be continually updating what we were doing much more quickly, so that users who were coming back, users who came to us for the first time, we're seeing, we're realizing that we were covering things in really rapid fashion, and so they should come back. Users who came back often could see whatever was new. And the extra benefit of this is that if we're updating this coverage really frequently, it performs particularly well on Google search, and is particularly compelling for users to share on social platforms. And optimizing all of what we're doing for those channels has been actually quite sort of a major focus of work so far this year. So what you can see here is some of the live coverage, the product experience we were creating for coronavirus. On the left, you can see on our homepage when we had sort of really regular updates happening globally and focused on the United States and the economy and New York specifically, where we're based. And then these next screens, you can see actually sort of the running vehicle we were using, where we have sort of bullet point updates on what you need to know, and then major updates all getting loaded one after the next into the same place that users can come back to and check repeatedly. Once we have users in the door, I mentioned that we're doing a better job of getting more readers in the door using things like that live coverage. We have invested a lot of time and gotten a lot better at bringing readers deeper on major storylines. Again, I'm highlighting coronavirus here, but that's something we did at the beginning of the year when we saw we're able to really effectively get readers to go deeper on stories like President Trump being impeached, or the crisis between the US and Iran, or the election, the presidential election that's been running all of this year. Some of the protests around issues of race that have been going on in the US over the better part of the last few months is another example. And so what we have been doing is we've been creating product experiences that that integrate with our stories, that make it easier for audiences to understand our coverage and know where to go next. So you see sort of at the top here, a navigation bar that runs at the top of every coronavirus story. If you'll see it right now, if you go to any of our coronavirus stories, this big screen in the back here, this is our hub, or sort of our home for all coronavirus coverage, where it's pulling in all of the latest updates and somebody can see everything about coronavirus. We have these modules like this frequently asked questions block that are sitting in the middle of, or at the bottom of, lots of our coronavirus stories, so that if someone is landing on it and reading through it, we are actually bringing the most up-to-date and most important and latest information to them right where they are, so that we can make sure that we're sort of guiding readers into what the next best story to read is. And we think that this is, it's creating the best possible reader experience for readers who are coming to this storyline and may be confused, or they may not know very much, or they may be trying to figure out where they can find reliable information. We're trying to bring as much of it to them right there. And as a result, we think readers, and we've seen this, readers will read more with us. And that ultimately makes them more likely to subscribe. We've been working to expose readers to our breadth. So what that means is, we want readers to go deeper on a story like coronavirus, but we don't, it's not the most uplifting story, and we would like to, particularly while readers, many of them are stuck at home in quarantine, we'd like to expose them to something that's a little bit more fun, something that is a little bit lighter and can be more relaxing than just reading about the news all the time. So we created this new product experience, editorial and product experience, called At Home, where we created a landing page and a newsletter and videos and other formats that are really all about what do you cook, what do you watch, what can you read, what can you do with kids while you're all stuck at home. And that's been something that we've seen a lot of really regular usage of over the last 6 or so months. It's a nice, change of pace, both a change of pace from the hard news, but also we think useful to people who are at home and need to know what to, they need to cook more often. They need things to do with their kids. It's actually, we're trying to make sure that we're being useful to people in all ways. And then finally, we're investing in newsletters. So this is something that we have been, like I said, we were heavily investing in before the coronavirus period happened. With the sort of millions of new users who we were getting to register and create free accounts through this new user journey, we recognized a moment to, I showed you earlier how one of the things we try to do once people register with us is get them to sign up for newsletters. The result is we're getting a huge number of more newsletter readers than we ever had before. And so we took our flagship newsletter, which was previously called the Morning Briefing, and relaunched it around one of our best and most prominent journalists, David Leonhardt, who now writes it every day and writes it as much more of a sort of a written through, narrated introduction to the Times every day rather than just sort of a bullet point list of headlines. And we've seen really great engagement with that. And it's been particularly useful during this coronavirus period where there's so much that you need to be guiding readers through every single morning. We're continuing to make investments in personalized recommendations. You see that on the right, one experiment with a personalized email that we're sending to people. And we are, in addition to those newsletters, which we were sort of doing anyway, we have taken what we've learned about getting people to engage via email and actually sort of applied it more directly to this exact moment. So pop-up newsletters, including the at-home newsletter, which I referenced earlier, but also this coronavirus briefing and the coronavirus schools briefing. You know, when we realized that coronavirus was going to be a story that was going to be probably with us for quite some time, we said, well, you know, what are all the ways we can be reaching people with that coverage? And one obvious way was just creating a dedicated email newsletter that just brought people the latest on all things coronavirus, you know, once a day at the end of the day. And so this gets sent now in the evenings and has particularly high, you know, is one of our highest sort of open and click rates of any of our newsletters. And then just last month, when we realized we saw how much interest there was in coverage around schools in reopening in the US, we said, that is such a dedicated area. And we know so many people, particularly parents, are keen on understanding the latest in that area. We're actually going to create a separate, you know, pop-up newsletter, we call it, to cover that. And so we're able to use everything we've learned about newsletters elsewhere, from how to launch it, to how to get people to sign up for it, to what will be most compelling for people to open it and what they'll want to click on to come back to our website. We've been able to sort of apply that and grow newsletters like this really quickly and build up a meaningful audience around them in a short amount of time. Am I running out of time?
Yep, 5 minutes.
Okay, got it. So why don't I'll just close really quickly by saying we're continuing to invest in new products too. Crosswords, cooking, those are more focused in the US than internationally, but continuing to drive growth. And you know, continuing to invest in our marketing and telling a story of why we're worth paying for. And we think that's going to keep us on a path to long-term growth. So I'll cut it there so I have time for questions. Thank you.
Fantastic. There are a few questions. One which relates to the sort of product team and where it sits and how it operates. During digital transformation, what were some of the measures you adopted to make sure journalists are on the same page as everyone else? And I think that ties in really with the autonomy of the product teams or the cross-functional teams. Mm-hmm. Maybe you want to just delve into that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So I would say that in many cases, we have had journalists in the newsroom who are dedicated partners of these product efforts. So they're really joint product and news efforts. So when it comes to sort of, say, relaunching our flagship newsletter, we've got the journalists who are writing that and editing that, and the product team that is working on rebuilding it in the same room together, talking about what that should look like as a holistic experience. So as much as possible, we've tried to think about the journalism and the product as one package, not two separate things, the way they might have been in the print era. The same is true for that, you know, live and storylines coverage I was talking about. We on the product side are very much responding to what journalists are telling us are the ways that they're seeing readers engage, or sort of what tools they need to be able to produce that coverage more quickly. So it's very much a close partnership.
A second question around global expansion. What percentage of your audience is from outside the USA, and what percentage Sorry, yeah, what percent, and do you see international growth as an opportunity?
It's a huge opportunity, yes. It's between, I have to double check, I believe it's between 15 and 20% now. And so we have seen a disproportionate number of, a disproportionate portion of our new subscribers be international. That's certainly been the case this year during the coronavirus period. And that is something we see as a major growth opportunity. A lot of what we're doing in terms of our actual coverage in these parts of the product experience applies everywhere, but there's many things, you know, some of our email newsletters that I even mentioned, this sort of the schools reopening, that's really focused on the US, right? Even some of our work on search engine optimization, those are things that need to be done differently in the US versus globally. And so we see there are probably many opportunities to continue to grow in specific international markets.
When you're talking numbers and projects, I mean, it's obviously huge numbers for most publishers that only dream of having a percentage of what you've got. How granular do you go when you're looking for subscription drives, or do you stay only with the big news events, or are you looking at school sports and trying to add little clusters of readers along the way, or just simply big?
It's a great question. I mean, we try to look at the biggest opportunities. I think that what's a big opportunity for us and what's a big opportunity for a different publisher is going to be very different. And so that's, I think that's important to look at, identifying which areas of coverage have the most interest, and not necessarily the most interest, but areas where the people who are interested are the most inclined to want to come back to you again and again, and so are most likely to want to be qualified to pay. So yeah, I mean, there's certainly areas, I think, like the thing I briefly mentioned at the end, cooking, that's a great example where that was not our biggest traffic driver, but we saw that as an opportunity to build a product and create a really engaged audience. And that's been a 5 to 7 year effort, but we have now at this point built that product and subscription base up that it is a meaningful part of our overall business. And we're always thinking about if there's other sort of niches where we can do that, but it is at this point, it does have to be as big enough that it feels like it will matter to our overall business. And that's probably going to be, there's certain niches where that won't rise to that level for us, at least right now.
All right. A final question. Most publishers struggle with churn.
Yes.
How do you tackle churn? Do you do it separately from your new subscriber drives?
It's a great question, and honestly, I probably didn't spend enough time talking about it because that's a huge, our churn that's something that it's come down pretty significantly over, particularly from the 2014-15 period to a couple of years ago. We worked very hard on a few different things. One was just getting our pricing efforts right, to make sure that we weren't getting people in on sort of cheap offers that then they wanted to cancel right away after a month or 3 months. We've really focused on longer term offers so that people, if they come off of a sale period, that's after 6 months or a year, where they've had a long time to sort of engage with us and build up a relationship. Involuntary churn, so credit card and billing failure, that's something that we used to have a big problem with, and we've really invested in tools to make it easier for people to keep their payments up to date, is another thing. And then all of the work I'm describing around engagement, that applies to subscribers too, and getting people to read more regularly in different places is, I think, the biggest sort of long-term factor in bringing churn down there.
Fantastic. We could go on for hours. Thank you for your time, Ben. We're going to leave this room now. So if you go back to the timeline and then rejoin the next session, which is with Philip Crawley from the Global Mail. Thanks,
Great.
Ben.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.